So good morning and welcome to today's training. Today we begin with the mirroring principles and configuration topic. So by the end of the chapter, you should understand what mirroring is and what it's used for and how to configure it. So during network maintenance, you may need to obtain and analyze packets in some conditions. For example, if you detect a suspected attack packets, you might want to obtain and analyze those packets so that you see where they're coming from which particular device, from which part of your network, and so on and so forth. So you need to obtain and analyze the packets without affecting the packet forwarding. So the attacker will continue forwarding the packets, but you'll also be looking at those packets. Now, mirroring technology copies packets on what we call a mirrored port to what we call an observing port without affecting packet processing on devices. So administrators can analyze the copied packets using the data monitoring device for network monitoring and troubleshooting. So almost similar to what we've been doing with Wireshark. And we've actually been doing mirroring when we do data capture with Wireshark. So it's very similar to that. So by the end of this chapter, you should be able to volunteer. Just enable your mic and go on.
Be familiar with mirroring principles.
Yes.
Know how to configure the mirroring function.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So let's look at the background. The background of mirroring. Now, mirroring is used for data collection in your network. So why do we need to collect data? Why do we need to collect, for example, packets in your network? So we need to do that in order to do what we call real-time service monitoring, also for fault analysis and location, so that we can know, for example, where there is a problem in your network. Also for network traffic optimization. We can know where there is congestion in your network because you can collect certain parameters that will show you how much is being actually used on a particular port, for example. So it can also be used for network traffic optimization. Okay, so those are the reasons as to why we need to do data collection. We have several ways in which you can do data collection. There are actually two ways. One of them is by use of a physical device called a splitter. So if we want to copy packets from RTA to RTB, we install in between the link for RTA and RTB, we install a splitter. So the splitter will be copying packets and passing the copied packets to what we call the collector. So that is one of the methods. The disadvantage of using a physical device, one of them is that it can get complicated and risky installing it within the link. So that's one of the disadvantages. Now, the other way is by using a centralized collection through a network management system. So the network management system, of course, will be interacting with your network devices via the SNMP protocol. So those are the two ways in which you can collect data on your network. So make sure that you understand the advantages and disadvantages of each of those methods. So let's look at mirroring. By definition, mirroring function copies packets on a specified port to another specified port. Now, that specified port from which we are copying packets is referred to as a mirrored port or a source port. And the other specified port to which we are copying, we are passing the copied packets is called a destination port or an observing port. So we have a mirrored port and an observing port. So the function for mirroring is to obtain complete packets for network analysis. Advantages: data collection is convenient and does not affect the existing network. The other one is real-time data flows are collected. So this ensures reliable data. So generally, that is the basics of mirroring. One thing that I can mention here is that there is no limitation on the number of mirrored ports. So you can mirror as many ports as possible to a single observing port. But care should be taken so that, for example, the bandwidth, the combined bandwidth, accumulated bandwidth of the mirrored ports does not highly exceed the observing port, because it means if we are mirroring from several, for example, 10 gig ports, and this is just a 10 gig, the observing port is also a 10 gig, it means that we're going to have data loss due to congestion on this observing port. So care should be taken and such considerations should be put in place. Okay. Now we have two roles when it comes to mirroring. The first role is what we've just talked about. So the first role is what we call a mirrored port. A mirrored port. So this is the port that is being monitored. So here you can see that we have two mirrored ports. Now, every packet that is coming in or outside this particular port is also copied to this port. So that is the second port role, which is known as the observing port. Observing port. So these dotted red arrows show that all the traffic that is coming in and going out of these two ports are actually being copied to this observing port. And now from your device, you can be able to see those particular packets. So your device there is referred to as the monitoring device. Let's look at this scenario and how we can configure mirroring. So in this particular case, this is our monitoring device. It's connected to this router on Ethernet 203. Now, we want to mirror packets that are coming in from these two interfaces that are connecting Office Area 1 and Office Area 2, respectively. So to ensure security, the enterprise wants to monitor all the packets sent from Office Area 1 and 2 through the monitoring device. So how do we configure this? So of course, the configuration roadmap is we configure this as the observing port, then we configure this and this interface as the mirrored port. So how do we do that? So configuration is quite easy. So for the observing port, this is the command. This is the command. So the command is observe-port. It should be on system view. Then int, then the name and the number of the interface that you want to configure as the observing port. So that is how you configure an observing port. So remember, we are doing this configuration on the router. Now, the next thing you have to do is now to configure this guy as a mirrored port. So how to do that? This is the command. You go into that interface, then use the command mirror space to observe-port. Then you select, for example, inbound. Now, we have three options. We have inbound, we have outbound, and we have both. So at this particular point, you can use inbound, outbound, or both. So inbound means you just want to copy packets that are coming into, packets that are coming into. Oh, sorry. You just want to copy packets that are coming into this interface. So that is what we call inbound. If you want to copy packets that are going out, then you specify this as outbound. So they're coming out. So if you want to monitor packets coming from Office 1, we set as inbound. If you want to copy packets that are going to Office 1, we set outbound. If you want to monitor both, to mirror both, then we use the both option there. So similarly, we are also configuring the interface that is connecting to Office Area 2 using the command mirror to observe port inbound. So you see, we've created the observe port. So we have a single observe port, and therefore when you use the command mirror to observe port, it's going to copy those packets to this particular interface that we've specified there. So it's that easy. It's that easy to configure what we call local port mirroring. Now, other than port mirroring, we have another concept which is known as traffic mirroring. Traffic mirroring. The difference between port mirroring and traffic mirroring is that port mirroring, if we mirror this particular port, then we are going to copy to the observed port every data flow that passes through this particular port. So that is port mirroring. We are going to copy every packet that comes from the marketing department. But what if we just want to monitor host A? We just want to monitor and copy packets that are coming from host A to our observing port. How do we do that? We do that by configuring traffic mirroring. So that's the difference. So traffic mirroring can be able to mirror a specified data flow. A specified data flow. So how to do that? You specify the data flow using, for example, access control lists and traffic classifiers. So let's look at that scenario. So in this particular scenario, we want to configure this mirrored port to capture packets, for example, from just host A. So how do we do that? So this guy is our observing port. So we configure in RTA, we configure the observing port as 200 01. Then after that, we create an SEL, a basic SEL. Then we specify the source IP address. So for example, the IP address of host A is 192.168.1.10. So we specify the source IP address. Then after that, we create a traffic classifier. So the traffic classifier, we're giving it a name C1. We are using the operator OR. So we are saying if C1, if it matches SEL 2000, if it matches SEL 2000, then what do we want to do? So we use a traffic behavior. If you remember this, we did it when we were doing RS. So traffic behavior B1, so that's the name of this particular traffic behavior. Then we use the command mirror to observe port. So that is what we want to do. If it matches this classifier, then we want it to mirror packets from this particular source to the observe port. So after creating the classifier and the behavior, we can now bind them together in a traffic policy. So we bind them together in a traffic policy called P1. So we specify the classifier as C1 and behavior as B1. So the traffic policy is simply combining the classifier and the behavior. Then after that, we now go into our mirrored port and we specify. So our mirrored port is 200. Then we specify, we apply that policy. We apply that policy in the inbound direction. So traffic policy P1 inbound. What does inbound mean? We only want to capture packets that are coming into, like that, into that interface, not out of that interface. So that is inbound. So if we want to capture both, then we can use also the both option there. So that is how you configure traffic mirroring. So by doing that, you are only going to mirror packets to the monitoring device from host A and not from host B and host C. So that's a very common question in the exam. Okay. Oh, that is it. That is it. It's quite a short topic. Any questions? Okay, great. Volunteer to take up the first question, another one to take the next one. Okay, so from your notes, please go through these two questions, and if you have an issue, you can raise it up when we begin the next topic. Asanteni sana.